What is the so-called golden age of golf architecture? For me, it's the result of three major innovations made toward the beginning of the 20th century. That's what I'm talking about today with my colleague, PJ Clark, in this latest installment of our Golf Architecture 101 series. I'm Garrett Morrison, and this is Designing Golf. PJ Clark, are you ready to talk about the golden age of golf architecture?
I think so. You pointed me in the direction of a wonderful thread on Golf Club Atlas.
Welcome to Golf Club Atlas.
And it seems like people have takes on this matter, so I'm ready to get into it.
It has been long debated on Golf Club Atlas in particular. It goes back at least 25 years, the discussion of this concept. And so I had you do just a little bit of reading to not to bring you completely up to date on it, but just to get a taste of it, just to get a little sense of what the ideas are about. And I hope it did that for you.
I certainly did that. I mean, people are very, it's something I've noticed through our little journey through Golf Architecture 101 here is that people are very passionate about these subjects and like to get some takes off, which is good. I appreciate that. So
there's nothing that gets people worked up like an extremely niche interest.
Yeah, exactly.
Like golf architecture. So that's sort of the nature of it. So I want you to, take yourself to a place before you read this thread and got a little sense for it. You had probably heard the term golden age of golf architecture thrown around in a lot of podcasts, right?
Yep.
So what had you already picked up about what golden age meant?
It feels like it was a long time ago. I want to call it 1910s ish, maybe World War I
sort of
area.
the middle of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's if you told me to give you a decade, I would have said 1910. I have a feeling the name like Donald Ross is probably going to come up in this at some level, maybe CB McDonald, those types of guys. Yeah, it's probably what I have for you. I would have just guessed this was around World War I and gone with it.
That's perfect. Yeah. Well, I mean, World War I is definitely in it. I think probably the decade most associated with the American golden age at the very least is the 1920s.
Okay.
And if we're talking about the British golden age, that's often more concentrated. The discussion of it is concentrated around things that happened in the 1900s, the first decade of the 20th century, up until the outbreak of World War I. So that is the general time period. You're right that C.B. McDonald and Donald Ross are two significant golden age architects, but I'm glad that you didn't know much more about it because we can kind of build up from there. So, in basic terms, the golden age of golf architecture occurred in what I would call the first few decades of the 20th century. So from about 1900 to about 1930 with the onset of the Great Depression, or some people would argue 1939 or 40 with the outbreak of World War II. But first few decades of the 1900s is how I usually think of it. And it was during this period that a lot of the best regarded golf courses of all time were built or renovated and turned into their permanent forms. A lot of this action was concentrated around Great Britain and North America, but there was plenty happening in continental Europe as well, Australia and New Zealand, Japan, South Africa. So definitely a global phenomenon here. The most famous architects of the Golden Age include not only C.B. McDonald and Donald Ross, whom you already mentioned, but also Harry Colt, Herbert Fowler, James Braid, Tom Simpson, Charles Hugh Allison, Alistair Mackenzie, whom we've touched on.
Familiar with his work,
times.
Sure.
Yeah. Seth Rayner, A.W. Tillinghast, George Thomas, William Flynn, Perry Maxwell, basically all the big boys. And then, the courses, if you just go down any top 100 list, Golden Age courses are most of the top portion of the list. So we're talking about Pine Valley, Cypress Point, the William Flynn design at Shinnecock Hills, National Golf Links, Augusta National, Marion, Chicago Golf Club, Pinehurst number 2, overseas, Royal County Down, Royal Portrush, and Muirfield all date back to the 1800s, but are probably best understood as 1920s or 30s Harry Colt designs. You have Royal Melbourne and Kingston Heath in Australia. You have Sunningdale and St. George's Hill in England. You have Hirono and Kawana in Japan. There really is an overwhelming dominance by the Golden Age in that set of golf courses considered to be the best in the world. So I think it's really important to understand, as you're learning about golf architecture, what the Golden Age is. It's a term that people toss around a lot. Oh, Golden Age this, Golden Age that. Oh, it's a Golden Age gem. What does that mean? Sometimes I think people who say it may not completely know what they mean by it, but just kind of have the vibe of it, which is okay. I'm not insulting that approach to the term, but what does the term really mean? What is this era? What made it so great? What made it special? What were the main innovations of that time? And why have the courses stood the test of time and continued to be massive, massive influences on current golf architects? Like, the influence of the Golden Age has been so overwhelming on current golf architects that a lot of them feel that there's basically no way to escape it. There's no way to surpass it. We might as well just give into it. That's how large the era looms right now. So that's what we're getting into today. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Feels like there were a lot of names there that I had obviously heard of, a lot of golf courses that I've obviously heard of. So this is good. I'm happy to dive into this. This feels like a little all encompassing here. Feels like if there's one thing to really know, this might be the episode. No,
it's a big subject. It's ambitious for this episode to tackle this. I have ways of kind of narrowing it down and maybe clarifying some things, like focusing on certain things that I think are useful. But there's no doubt that we're tackling a big one today.
Let's do it.
All right. So before we get into how the Golden Age began, what these innovations were that I've referred to a couple of times, let's talk about our sponsor for this episode, Club Champion. Every Club Champion built club comes with a perfect fit guarantee that ensures what you saw in the fitting bay is what you'll see on the course. On average, Club Champion's customers see 21 plus additional yards off the tee, 16 yards better dispersion with irons, measurably more fairways and greens in regulation, and fewer three putts. Club Champion has 5,000 plus 5-star reviews, and the last third-party study found that 7 out of 8 golfers lowered their handicap by an average of 5 strokes after just one season with their fitted clubs. So significant impact here. Now, if you get your clubs, take them out on the course, and don't get the results that you saw when you were being fit to them, you can take them back to a Club Champion, the Club Champion location where you got fit within 90 days, and they will make it right. So here's the deal for Designing Golf listeners. You can get a free driver or iron fitting with a club purchase using code FRIEDEGG at clubchampion.com/FRIEDEGG. So again, free driver or iron fitting with a club purchase, code FRIEDEGG, clubchampion.com/FRIEDEGG. All right. So to prepare for this episode, PJ, as you mentioned before, you read a recent thread on the message board Golf Club Atlas. This thread was started by the architect Tom Doak, and he was asking, what is a golden age? His answer, which I found very interesting, was people developing golf courses on interesting land. Basically, Doak is arguing that what made the golden age different from other eras was that architects had an unusual number of great and distinctive properties to work with. And by the way, he's also indicating that this is what connects the first golden age with the current era of golf architecture. You know, sometimes people call the current era the second golden age, right? Architects like Corin Crenshaw, Gil Hansen, obviously Tom Doak himself, have started to work on really exciting land again. So that was his argument. And then he opened it up for discussion, and some forum members chimed in with their own takes. What did you make of all this? Were there any ideas that appealed to you in this? Any ideas that seemed confusing? How did you process it?
My main takeaway, and I don't remember the member who said this, but I liked the point, is that I feel like somebody alluded to, I'm just going to paraphrase, that we are only considering these courses golden age because they've stood the test of time for 100 plus years now in some cases, that it's hard to really judge what is a current golden age until we're further away to see if these places are still relevant in 50, 60, 100 years. That, I think, is my main takeaway.
Absolutely. Hindsight is 2020 on this stuff. People living through the first few decades of the 20th century did not say we're in a golden age of golf architecture. That term was applied back to the era. Starting maybe 30 years ago, I've tried to figure out exactly who's responsible for the coinage of the term, the golden age of golf architecture. My impression is that it was kind of in common discussion by the late 90s. And then Jeff Shackelford wrote a book called The Golden Age of Golf Design. The exact wording of the title I'm not sure of, but it was a book about the golden age that kind of surveyed the different architects and courses that were relevant. And I think that had a big role to play in popularizing the term. But this sense that there was a golden age toward the beginning of the 20th century in golf course design was really in formation in the 80s and 90s, but not so much before that. So it's only retrospectively that this stuff becomes clear or starts to take on certain labels. And obviously we're prisoners of our own time. We label eras how we feel like labeling eras. We call the Renaissance, right? But William Shakespeare didn't say this is the Renaissance.
No, you have to. The future generations get the benefit of knowing what already happened and can use that to however they want to shape things, I guess.
So I'm a big Bob Crosby guy.
Yep.
He's been on the podcast a few times. He's extraordinarily intelligent in his takes on golf architecture. So he contributed to the thread, and I particularly loved what he said. He said that a golden age is a time when people are working through the ramifications of a new idea. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I like that.
It's an insight that goes across art forms as well. So I mentioned the Renaissance. You could say that the European Renaissance was a time when people were working through the ramifications of a new idea. And that new idea, or at least one of them, was humanism, right? An interest in the individual, a willingness to put individual humans at the center of plays and paintings and other forms of art. That was a massive, massive idea of the Renaissance, and the excitement of that idea, the possibilities of it, gave the art of that era a lot of vitality and staying power. There are other reasons that we call the Renaissance the Renaissance. There was also an economic Renaissance, and people were becoming wealthier, and that's part of the reason why they were able to make art and have fun and do cool stuff.
Yes.
But certainly part of it is working through the ramifications of a new idea. So I think when you pair Bob's insight with Tom's, you have something close to the answer that I like for the golden age of golf architecture. The golden age was a time when golf architects were working through the ramifications of a new set of ideas, and they got to apply those ideas to really good pieces of land. So let's dig into what the new ideas were, or what I think they were. This is kind of my interpretation and processing of all of this. And I've boiled it down to three big ones. One, the idea of spending a lot of money on the construction of a golf course. Two, the idea of strategic design, which you're familiar with from past lessons, so to speak. Three, the idea of building artificial features that appear natural. Again, a concept that we've touched on before, maybe haven't dug into super deeply yet. Mm-hmm. So basically money, strategy, and naturalism. Those are the three ideas that we're going to cover.
Okay.
Now, it's obviously pretty hard to nail down the time and place when any given new idea begins. Ideas are always sort of in the process of development. So we could trace this back to ancient Rome if we wanted, I'm sure, right? But in the case of the golden age of golf architecture, I think 1901 in the suburbs southwest of London is a really good starting point.
Okay.
It's very specific, right? And that's because three big things happened in that year, in that place. First, Sunningdale Golf Club opened. Second, nearby at Woking Golf Club, a pair of members named Stuart Payton and John Lowe started to make changes to the course. And later in 1901, back at Sunningdale, Harry Colt became the first secretary of the club. And these three events kind of launched these ideas of money, strategy, and naturalism, which in turn, I think, powered the golden age of golf architecture.
Okay.
So I've set up a framework, right? 3 events, 3 ideas. It's important to note, by the way, since we're talking about land as well, ideas being applied to good land, Sunningdale and Woking both occupy a particular type of terrain called heathland, right? And we won't get too deep into the geology here. I think it's interesting, but it would take us down a different road. But essentially, heathland is pretty well suited to golf because, one, the soils are sandy and drain well.
Okay.
A lot of inland sites don't do that, right? Heavy clay soils are not as good for golf. Heathland soils are unusually good for inland golf. The best terrain tends to be seaside, linksland, which is sandy. Heathland at least has a little bit of sandiness to it, right? Mm-hmm. 2, they're covered by this low scrubby vegetation called heather, which is a decent natural hazard. You can find your ball in it, but it's hard to play out of it. And 3, heathland generally alternates between open and wooded, which makes for some nice variety in a golf course. But even though heathland is a good landscape for golf, it's not linksland, right? In order to make the terrain golfable, you usually have to do quite a bit in heathland. At the very least, you have to remove some trees and take out a bunch of heather to make way for the fairways and greens. On linksland, often you could just kind of play golf, right? Heathland, there would be some engineering required, like many inland sites, and that's an important factor here.
Okay.
All right, so the first event is the opening of the old course at Sunningdale Golf Club. Sunningdale was, architecturally speaking, really the first modern golf course. And that's a big claim, but I think a major reason for it is that it was the first golf course project to have a large amount of money behind it. Now, in order to understand why that was so important, I think you have to know a little bit about how golf courses were created before Sunningdale. So in the 1800s and before, courses tended to be laid out very quickly. If a designer was involved, he would spend a day or two walking around the site and making recommendations. Sometimes these recommendations would be really excellent. I don't want to discount, the expertise that goes into routing a golf course, but the reality is it would happen very quickly. No offense to old Tom Morris, basically, is what I'm saying. And then the club members would usually complete the course. They would build it, and very little earth moving would be done. So the quality of a given course really depended on the quality of the routing, and most importantly, the land. Where the land was good for golf, the courses turned out well, like Scottish linksland. This is where the game was invented, so the land was obviously perfect for it. And many very old Scottish links courses are still with us today and treasured today. But something important happened in the late 1800s, 1880s and 1890s, the late Victorian era. And that was that golf got popular in England. The historian Michael Morrison, no relation, calls it the Great English Golf Boom. So English people start establishing a lot of new courses very quickly, and often these courses are not on linksland. For the first time in golf history, new courses were by and large being created inland. And it's hard to express how big of a change this was. Golf was moving away from the land that inspired the game to be played in the first place. Golf was a way of using linksland. The game and the land were very intertwined, right? So when English people started trying to move the game inland in the 1880s and 90s, they kind of had to reinvent what a golf course was. Now, at first, the attempts at creating inland courses were pretty rudimentary. Basically, the same method was used that had always been used. A golf professional would visit for a day or two, tell the members what to do, etc. Courses were built very cheaply, partly because no one knew whether the enthusiasm for golf would last, right? If this fad goes away tomorrow, I don't want to be stuck holding a bunch of debt
Yes.
right?
Understandable.
Now, again, this wasn't a bad method for laying out a links course. But what English people found is that it wasn't as good for laying out an inland course. Early inland courses in England were pretty poor for the most part because they were often muddy. Once you move away from linksland, it's much harder to find naturally occurring close-cropped turf. They weren't as interesting to play as links courses because the land usually didn't have the natural undulation and the natural hazards of links. And, so it was obvious why they weren't as good, but they were golf courses and people enjoyed them and the game kept growing in England. The fad did not go away. So 1901 rolls around. The game is in a secure place. It's starting to be taken more seriously as a permanent feature of British life. And two brothers, T.A. and G.A. Roberts. Don't ask me what T.A. and G.A. stand for. I think probably Tom and George, but who knows?
Could be Harry Potter fans. Who knows?
They decide to found Sunningdale Golf Club. They hire Willie Park Jr. to design the course. Park was a well-established golf professional and course designer, two-time winner of the Open. So Park designed the course and helped to oversee construction, starting in the year 1900. And this was a kind of golf course construction project that had never been seen before. The course took a year and a half to build. At one point, there were 70 men, 30 horses, and 10 plows on site. In total, it cost £4,000. This obviously seems like a minuscule amount now, and not just because of inflation, right? People just spend more relatively even on golf course projects now. But at the time, absolutely massive. It was way, way more money than had ever been spent on building a golf course. Way more time, way more effort. So, for example, to my knowledge, Sunningdale was the first course ever to be seeded all the way through. Before Sunningdale, courses would mostly just use natural turf and sort of encourage it to spread and be good, right? At Sunningdale, they actually planted turf grass on all the tees, fairways, and greens, and that was just revolutionary. So how did they do all this? How did they have all this money to spend on a golf course project? First, Sunningdale was located in a region where wealthy people lived, and it was built by and for these people. So the developers of the course, the Roberts brothers, felt comfortable that they could earn back the relatively big investment that they made on the construction of the course. Secondly, and relatedly, Sunningdale was basically a land speculation scheme. So the Roberts brothers were going to build the course, and then they were going to sell the surrounding lots to wealthy London suburbanites to build houses. So this gave them some confidence that they could make that initial heavy investment.
It's always a land speculation scheme at the end of the day. Everything is a land speculation scheme.
Behind everything is real estate, right? And so it obviously, this became an important model for golf course development in the golden age and beyond. Something that people discount a little bit. People sometimes act as though real estate golf was invented in 1960, but no, it was there right at the beginning of modern golf architecture. Now, I think maybe the most important reason that so much money went into Sunningdale is that the people building the course were trying to solve the problems of inland golf. They had seen enough inland English courses over the past 2 decades to know that these courses just weren't as good as Scottish links. And so they made a bigger commitment at Sunningdale and tried to create a course that could stand toe-to-toe with a real links course. They put effort, time, and money into engineering this piece of land for golf. It was really what turned golf course design into golf course architecture, right? Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah.
So, Sunningdale was a professionally constructed environment. Now, by our standards today, it's an extremely natural golf course,
Sure.
right? But in its time, it stood out as a work of architecture rather than just a piece of land adapted to golf. And this is the key, I think. Like, the idea of spending a lot of money on golf course construction essentially created a new discipline called golf course architecture. Now, the obvious next step, what is golf course architecture? And that to me is the huge question that the Golden Age was addressing and working out the ramifications of. If we're architects now, if we're calling ourselves architects and we're doing architecture, what should we be building and why? Right. Suddenly this was a hot topic of discussion in the golf world, and it led, I think, to the first properly worked out theory of golf course design. All right.
Okay.
So that's
that
Sunningdale opening.
Yeah.
All right. Any reflections or questions on that so far?
I don't know. This feels like kind of the Pandora's box moment of this whole thing, is that when you start putting money into something for the first time and getting maybe not even necessarily profit out of it, but getting return out of it, people are inevitably going to copy that at some level.
Oh yeah. It's a virus, right? And you know, it's not it's not always a bad virus. It's usually a bad virus, money being the root of all evil, etc. But look, like it was a Pandora's box moment. I think that's a great way of putting it. Once you invent this new financial technology of building a golf course with a lot of money, then it just tends to kind of spiral, right?
Yeah.
It's like with anything. You know, the more money you put into it, the more money you put into it.
Yeah. And the more money everybody else puts into it. So this is that makes sense. I do I think the acknowledgement at some level that it was kind of a real estate play is also funny too, because especially as you've seen land values kind of grow everywhere recently. I know land is always like a big thing when people talk about the new golf courses being built. So I think the acknowledgement that at its very basic first ever level that this was also in some sense a real estate play, to me is very funny, because the more things change, the more they stay the same.
You know, if people say that core golf facilities, right, golf facilities that are not connected to any other kind of economic activity like real estate, that's a legacy of the Golden Age, I think that's incorrect. Mm-hmm. It's just not. Like, links golf courses from the 1800s were core golf facilities, but they also weren't really, economic propositions.
Sure.
They were more or less open land, most of them free to play. They weren't really part of the economy for the most part. I mean, there are some nuances there. St. Andrews the town has obviously always benefited from the tourism that the golf attracts, and that goes back a long way.
Yep.
But it's different. The Golden Age invented the real estate golf course. Now, these golf courses were not the type where you had houses, cookie cutter houses lining both sides of the fairway. That's not what we're talking about. But Cypress Point was a real estate play. Pebble Beach was a real estate play. Pasatiempo, real estate. There are some exceptions there are plenty of exceptions to this from the Golden Age. I would venture to say that most of the golf courses were core golf course facilities. But if we're talking about innovation, and innovation of the Golden Age was the real estate golf course. Now, Sunningdale doesn't feel that way when you play it because the property has integrity. It's not crowded with houses, but along all the boundaries, there's a neighborhood. That's the Sunningdale neighborhood.
Yeah, not a coincidence, I'm sure.
So that brings us to Woking Golf Club in 1901. One of my favorite golf course names, because it just bothers people that it's woke, and that woke golf architecture.
Woke nonsense.
It was basically invented here. Woke golf architecture at Woking Golf Club. This kind of delights me. So two particularly woke members of Woking, named Stuart Payton and John Lowe, started to make some alterations to the golf course around 1901. They were thoughtful guys, both members of the Oxford-Cambridge Golfing Society, which is kind of the...
Ooh, sounds intense. Sounds
this is
big.
the secret society. I mean, to this day, if you want to locate the power source of global golf, then look no further than the Oxford-Cambridge Golfing
This is good.
Society.
We're getting into like the Assassin's Creedification of golf here. This is Who are the Knights Templar, really? I mean, we're at the end of the table here.
That's exactly where we are. We're at the center of the maze. Lowe was he was an RNA member and a writer who wrote about golf topics prolifically, and Peyton actually lived in a house on the club property. So, envision Lowe and Peyton talking after dinner while drinking some brandy in Peyton's house, and then maybe they'd sneak out onto the golf course with some shovels and start digging. That's kind of the vibe. I don't know if that actually happened, but I kind of think it did.
Sure, why not? Just walk out the back door. It's fine.
It's right
Nobody
there.
will know. Yeah,
it's right there. We're liquored up and we've been talking about golf architecture. Let's go
do it.
Put some things into practice here. So the reason they were making changes to the course at Woking was that they thought it was bad. Woking had been built in 1893. It's actually thought to be the first course established in the English heathlands. It was designed by a Scottish professional named Tom Dunn. And Dunn was the leading golf course designer of that great English golf boom period.
Okay.
He designed a number of courses in England, a remarkable number of courses in England in the 1880s and 90s. And like all golf course designers of that period, he worked very quickly. He walked a site for a day or two, made his recommendations, and left. And he also followed what was the prevailing philosophy of design, which was that hazards should be positioned to penalize poor shots. We've discussed this before as the penal school of design. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad take. I think he's making some good points. I think if you hit a bad shot, that's when you should get penalized. I'm kind of liking the way this guy thinks.
The distinction here
that makes me not woke though.
Right, yeah.
Because if the woke guys thought that was bad, then it's a whole nother issue. So
it's the no spin zone over here with PJ.
Yeah, you can set me straight.
You're a common sense guy. There is a certain common sense appeal to this philosophy, penalize bad shots. But I think, the nuance here that we have to keep in mind is that these hazards were positioned to punish poor shots by poor players. Not just to punish bad shots, but to punish really bad shots, right? And so that's I think an important point. But like penal courses weren't necessarily hard. They were just designed with the intention of punishing those poor strikes by poor players. So you'd have those linear cross bunkers in front of tees to catch top drives. You'd have similar cross bunkers in front of greens to catch topped approaches. And ideally, you'd have rough and additional bunkers along the sides of the fairway to penalize hooks and slices. Some people now call this the steeplechase style.
I like that.
Yeah, steeplechase. The golfers are the horses.
Yeah.
We're jumping over cross bunkers. And that was the kind of design that Tom Dunn originally implemented at Woking. For the most part. I think that he did some things that were like a little more interesting there. And his routing is, I think, mostly intact, and it's a really good routing. I played the course a couple of months ago and loved it. But it has been changed a lot over the years, especially by John Lowe and Stuart Payton. So by 1901, we know that John Lowe in particular had it with this stuff, right? We know this because John Lowe wrote a lot about it, right? Payton, to my knowledge, didn't do much writing. So we're not sure of his perspective. But John Lowe did. He had noticed, and many others had as well, that it simply didn't produce interesting inland golf courses to design them in this steeplechase style, especially for good players. If you hit it reliably long and straight, these steeplechase designs were not challenging or compelling. They were too easy and above all, just thoughtless, right? You didn't need to strategize. You just had to find the fairway, find the green, rinse, repeat. And yes, if you were playing a match against a poor player, you would win. And that would be great. That would be fair, right? But the game...
You want a little bit more of a challenge. Sure. It's understandable.
More challenge, more interest. These courses just wore thin after a while.
Okay.
Was the argument that John Lowe was making. You are free to like them, PJ. Now, okay, furthermore, another point here is that Lowe had picked up on the fact that the old Scottish links, like St. Andrews, were strategically complex and interesting. And this was a key insight because the conventional wisdom was that Scottish links courses didn't have any design content. They were just natural, right? Random. And many English golfers felt that they could do better if they just applied their Victorian intellects to the task of golf course design. Here are these natural, wild courses. And hey, if we just think about it a little bit, we can design better ones. Well, Lowe was saying, no, we're not doing better. Maybe we should take another look at these old wild courses, which are so fun to play, and consider whether they do actually have design characteristics worth emulating. Eventually, through his study of Scottish links, Lowe came up with a brand new theory of hazard placement. He said, we shouldn't be placing hazards to punish poor strikes by poor players. We should be placing them to punish almost great strikes by good players. This was a counterintuitive idea. He was saying, one of the main things that makes St. Andrews so interesting is that the bunkers are exactly where a good golfer might want to play.
Yeah.
And this generates what Lowe called a contest of risks. In order to earn the greatest advantage, the best position in the fairway, you don't just have to hit the ball well. You also need to take a risk by playing near a hazard without going into it. And you can certainly decline the risk and play away from the hazard, but you won't earn the greatest advantage on the hole for your next shot. So here's how Lowe put it. He said, the true hazard should draw play towards it, should invite the golfer to come as near as he dare to the fire without burning his fingers. Good sentence, Johnny Lowe. Good writing there. So this was the foundation of what we now call the strategic school of golf course design. Big idea number 2 that set off the golden age. Does that all feel pretty familiar to you at this point?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that at length, and it makes sense, providing rewards for taking on risk. Again, pretty logical, like this woke line of thought we have going on here.
Speaking of which, back to Woking. The 4th hole at that course was originally a pretty simple straight par 4 with a railroad on the right. There was a wide fairway, no bunkers, some rough on the left, maybe some trees. Then there was a classic Victorian cross bunker in front of the green. So this was essentially an embodiment of the penal school. The hazards were there to capture poor shots, hooks, slices, tops.
Okay.
So in 1902, Stuart Payton makes a couple of alterations to the hole. One, he builds a pair of bunkers right in the middle of the goddamn fairway. His inspiration here is the Principal's Nose bunker complex on the 16th hole at St. Andrews.
Okay.
So basically what he's doing is recreating the strategic geometry of that par 4 at the old course. Now, the centerline bunkers are obviously a controversial change for the members. They say, why in the world would you put a hazard right where I want to play my ball? But for Payton and Lowe, that was exactly the point, right? So other key change that Payton makes to this 4th hole is redesigning the green complex. He takes out that fronting cross bunker and he puts in one bunker, smaller, at the left front corner of the green. That bunker gets in the way of approaches from the left side of the fairway. That's the safe side of the fairway, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because you have the Principal's Nose in the middle of the fairway, and then you have the railroad out of bounds on the right. So you have two main options. You can try to thread your drive between the Principal's Nose and the railroad, or you can bail out to the left of the Principal's Nose, where you don't have to contend with the bunker and the railroad, right? Now, furthermore, the green tilts from back to front and a little bit left to right. So if you're hitting from that left side of the fairway, you not only have to carry the new bunker at the front left corner of the green, but you're also dealing with a green that runs away from you. It's much preferable to be able to land your approach short and let it run onto the green, but you can only do that if you play between the principal's nose and the railroad.
I'm sure the people who had never experienced this before just loved this. I'm sure the general public were huge fans of what was going on here. I can't imagine.
People were in an uproar.
Yeah, I riots even. Pitchforks, fire, all of those medieval times things.
There were many things written about how pissed off Woking Golf Club members were about this change to the hole.
That's great. Get the people going. It's provocative.
But ultimately, somehow, the changes did remain.
Okay.
I don't know why, but they stayed and they're still there today.
Okay.
In the meantime, this kind of, hullabaloo found its way around the English golf world. A guy named Tom Simpson visited Woking and was actually inspired to become a golf architect by seeing the hole for the first time. And he went on to become a significant golf architect in his own right and a golf architecture writer. Amazing, right?
Sure. I take inspiration from anywhere. I can just imagine these newspapers getting passed around all of South London being like, can you believe this? Can you believe what's going on over here? I could just,
what's wrong with these guys?
Yeah, this sounds fantastic.
So it turned out to be a major moment in history, right? A clear instance of something changing in the zeitgeist.
Yep.
Now, not all Golden Age courses from that point forward were strategic, but I think it's fair to say that all the significant ones were influenced by this new tension between strategic and penal.
Okay.
And architects had to make a choice now. What am I about? Am I about strategic golf, or am I about penal golf, or am I saying that we have a mixture of both?
So is that kind of like a sweeping kind of move across everything, or was that more gradual? Like, did everybody just adopt this new line of thinking immediately, or did it kind of creep up on people?
It crept up on people, but I think by the 1920s, the strategic school of design had won.
Okay.
That doesn't
like if you were to put a percentage on it, like by 1920 was it like 80-20?
I'm not sure you could put a percentage on it. I think if we're talking about the significant golf courses, what people considered the really good golf courses, the ones that were made by the top architects, then a majority for sure.
Okay. Sure.
You could say were strategic school golf courses. But it's not always that simple. Like, I don't think Donald Ross, for instance, is consistently strategic at all in some cases. It's clear that he understood how to make a strategic hole, but he didn't always do it. The same with Seth Rayner, right? A lot of the templates are not strategic. Some of them clearly are, but others don't seem to be. And so, these things are always a little bit chaotic. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the introduction of this idea kind of changed everything. It didn't mean that everybody immediately adopted it, but it meant that there was now an understanding and a discussion about how to strategically arrange golf holes and golf courses. Okay. Right?
Makes sense.
I think that's a big deal. And that tension really ended up helping to define the entire era. Okay, so the third and final moment of 1901 that we're going to talk about is Harry Colt arriving at Sunningdale Golf Club and beginning his job as secretary. So, like so many of the characters that we've talked about so far, Colt was educated at Cambridge University. He was an intellectual kind of guy, very in touch with the latest ideas in English golf. Now, as a reminder, the old course at Sunningdale had just been built by Willie Park Jr. It was by far the most expensive and ambitious golf course construction project to that point in history. You could even say it was the first true work of golf course architecture. But over the next several years, Harry Colt made a lot of changes to Sunningdale. For one thing, he did follow John Lowe's new philosophy of hazard placement. So he removed some cross bunkers and replaced them with more strategically positioned bunkers. And as he rebuilt these features, he did something new and very interesting. He intentionally shaped them to appear natural. He gave them a low profile, right? So that they blended in with the lay of the land. They didn't stand up out of the terrain. They were set into the land. And he gave them an irregular, ragged aesthetic that mimicked the natural sandy wastes in the surrounding heathland. This idea of making artificial features appear natural was, again, new, right? At inland courses built in the 1880s and 90s, bunkers and other manufactured hazards were what you might call functional in appearance. They weren't shaped for any particular effect. You know, if you built a bunker, you would just dig out some dirt in a straight line and stack it up on one edge. This was more or less the process followed initially at Sunningdale in Willie Park's design, though to my eye, he did make at least some effort toward a pleasing aesthetic. But Colt clearly brought a more specific attitude about shaping to Sunningdale. He was pursuing naturalism. Now, we don't have a lot of information about why Colt in particular turned toward naturalism in golf architecture. Certainly, we know that he was one of the first to practice it, maybe the first to become completely proficient at it, skillful at it, and certainly the most influential exponent of it. We know that Colt had a direct influence on Charles Hugh Allison and Alister McKenzie because he worked with them. He later brought them into his architecture firm. And then Allison and McKenzie exported those ideas across the world, right? To the US, to Australia, Japan, etc. McKenzie was especially enthusiastic about all this. He compared naturalism in golf architecture to battlefield camouflage, which proved to be a very influential formulation of this idea. You know, the idea being that military fortifications would be blended into the landscape so that the enemy couldn't see them.
Yep.
McKenzie thought about bringing this to golf architecture. The enemy, I guess, being the player.
That is quite a way of thinking.
It's interesting, isn't it? And McKenzie did some of this work in wars, in the Boer War in particular, which is a semi-obscure war these days. But he helped to conceptualize battlefield fortifications that blended into the landscape. If you think about it, that's kind of what naturalist golf architects are trying to do at golf architects. They're trying to create artificial features that aren't noticeable as artificial.
Everything I learned about Alister McKenzie just goes further and further down a rabbit hole that I never expected to actually go down. This guy's out here doing Augusta National, but at the same time going like, oh, I'm going to go win a war too. Like what?
Well, he did the war thing
much first,
earlier.
But yeah, like same guy.
Same guy. Yeah, same guy. He had quite a life.
Yeah, clearly.
I mean, just imagine traveling as he did from England to Australia.
Yeah, I mean, that's
before planes.
Yeah, that's already too much for me. So he had a lot of time on boats, I guess, to think about his war strategies and also golf courses.
Yep.
A true Renaissance man. We talked about Renaissance a lot already in this podcast. I mean, I don't know how you could get better than that.
He's a fascinating figure. You know, he starts in England, he ends up in, Santa Cruz, California, living in a house at Pasatiempo.
I don't know. I think that might need to, maybe around the Masters next year, Golf Architecture 101, just the biography of Alister McKenzie.
Just Alister McKenzie.
Yeah.
we've already given you too many tantalizing details about him.
Yeah, I don't know what's left, but I want to find out.
Fascinating guy. Yeah, endlessly fascinating to me. So, all right, naturalism comes into golf architecture through Harry Colt.
Okay.
Now, as with strategic design, it would be wrong to say that all the courses from that point on were naturalist. You could say, though, that all the serious courses had some relationship to naturalism, either embracing it or resisting it. But, I think the bigger and more interesting question here is where this idea of naturalism in golf architecture came from, right?
Yeah.
Aside from Harry Colt's brain.
Did he just decide one day to do it? Like, what?
Clearly not.
What prompted it? Yeah.
Yeah. That's not how humans behave. They don't just come up with a brand new idea completely on their own and use it to revolutionize everything.
No.
There is a source for this. So,
Okay.
I have, and a couple of others have had some theories on this. One, this is another example of links golf informing inland golf architecture in the Golden Age. Part of what makes links golf so compelling is that it's natural, right? It feels like you're contending with Mother Nature rather than an artificial construct.
Okay.
And that's pleasing and satisfying, right?
Yeah.
You feel like you're a burly man out in nature or a burly woman out in nature.
Sure.
I don't know if women often like to think of themselves as burly, but let's just go with it. You're an adventurous person out there, and you're contending with nature as opposed to some little contrivance that an architect has come up with. And that can be fun, right?
Okay.
So when you go to inland courses, though, you have a problem because they can't be as natural as links courses, because the land needs to be altered to be playable and to be interestingly playable, right? The links naturally suits itself to golf. You don't have to change much. And so links courses can be natural. Inland courses have to be engineered in some way. But with some artistry and effort in construction, we can at least make inland courses appear natural. And that was the insight and the goal of Golden Age architects, Harry Colt in particular.
Is it just to get the feeling of the links land, like as the player? Like what? I don't know. I think
it's just to get the feeling of Mother Nature.
Okay.
Some architects were trying to imitate the look of the links land, right? Sometimes they do try to do that specifically, but I think it's more like trying to adapt the artificial features to the surrounding landscape in a convincing way. So engineering the golf course to be playable, to have turf at the very least, right?
Yeah. That's important.
Yeah. And to have some interesting undulations and stuff, but also to be skillful enough when you're building this stuff to make it appear as though it was always there.
I've never been to Scotland. Obviously, it's great and all that. Is that like, I don't know, in your personal opinion are hot these days in golf. In your personal opinion, like, is that mandatory? Is that important to have some level of naturalism?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It is my personal preference. It's not mandatory, though. And many people disagree with me about that personal preference. Many people say it is okay for a golf course to be overtly manufactured.
Yeah.
And, if you look at a lot of McDonald and Rayner courses, if you look at Langford and Moreau courses like Lawsonia Links, they don't look natural, really. The features don't look natural. Mm-hmm. And yet they're very pleasing to play. And so that would be the counter argument.
Okay.
But it was the belief of Harry Colt and especially Alistair McKenzie and Tom Simpson and others that the goal was to fool the player, essentially deceive the player into believing that the features of the golf course were natural. All right, so what's another source of naturalism in golf architecture aside from links golf? I think that this was very much part of the general naturalist movement in English culture at the time. Even in global culture, right? In the US, there was a naturalist movement that I used to teach my students about in literature class with Emerson and Thoreau and all those sorts of people, right? Mm-hmm. This is about the appreciation of nature, the aesthetic beauty of the wilderness in its untouched state, the physical health benefits of being in nature. These weren't new ideas, obviously, but they were very much gaining cultural power through the 19th century, especially as industrialization and urbanization were speeding up in England more than anywhere else in the world, aside from, to an extent, certain places in the US, right? England was the epicenter of global industrialization. As this was happening, there was a strong sense among writers and artists and philosophers and wokesters that human beings needed to get back to nature. And the catch-all term for this is the romantic movement, romanticism. But I think that might be a little bit too broad. Naturalism, I think, is the best word for it. Now, in building architecture, right? So we're getting closer to golf architecture now. In building architecture, naturalism found expression in what's called the arts and crafts movement. And this was a style of art and architecture in the late 1800s that emphasized sense of place. It emphasized natural, organic shapes and materials. Basically, it was a reaction against the perceived over-mechanization of artistic products. And I'll give credit to the historian Tom McWood for documenting the connections between the arts and crafts movement and naturalist golf architecture. There are many, many connections, right? All these guys were friends with each other, around London. The people who were spearheading these movements, naturalism and golf architecture, arts and crafts and building architecture, they were all part of the same social circle and reading each other's stuff. So that is a big deal there, right? The general surge of romanticism and naturalism as a reaction to industrialization and urbanization, that came out in the first decade of the 20th century in golf architecture.
Okay. I never thought about it that way. I had no reason to think about it that way. But now that you lay it out there, it makes sense. I get it that, people are tired of the Industrial Revolution at this point, sure.
Did you learn about this much in school, the Romantic movement, the Naturalist movement? Is this registering for you as a framework that you already have?
Yeah, this is unlocking things that I haven't thought about in a long time. So yeah, it's definitely my brain. You can probably see the wheels churning in my brain right now. But yeah, I'm
bringing
up
up some images of notebooks.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Panic
I know where we're
scrawls
at.
in them during final exams.
Yeah,
Things
exactly.
Of that nature. Yeah. Well, I hope it doesn't bring back too much trauma. But yes, this is a key connection to make, right? Golf architecture and golf are not isolated from history. They are part of broader history. They're part of culture. And they react to those influences from history and from culture. And so when anything changes in golf architecture, we have to consider what else is happening around it, because we're all members of the same world and inevitably influenced by what we're seeing in other domains of life, even if we're not really conscious of being influenced in that way, right? But I do think that the broader underlying factor here is that golf architecture in the early 20th century suddenly took on the status of an art. There was more money behind it. It had become a higher status pursuit. It was being practiced not just by working class Scottish professional golfers. It was being practiced by middle and upper class, often snobby, Oxford and Cambridge educated Englishmen. Not to stereotype too much, but this is what was happening. And they were bringing their tastes into the discipline. Naturalism, this desire for the complexity of strategy, right? Beyond just fairness. This idea that you could engineer a landscape and then make it appear natural afterwards. All of these were, strike me as very typical lines of thinking among this class of people in this location in the world. And that, more than anything, is, I think, what set off the golden age of golf architecture. New people with a new perspective were taking the craft seriously. And that is a complex legacy. Just because it's called the golden age doesn't mean that we can't criticize some aspects of it. One indisputable legacy of the golden age, which we made glancing reference to toward the beginning of this episode, is that golf became more expensive to play. The best new courses became the domain of wealthy people. And to an extent, early Scottish golf, if you looked at who was playing golf at St. Andrews in the late 1700s, there was a mix of people, but a lot of the most frequent players on the links were wealthy Scottish guys, Scottish aristocrats. That kind of changed in the middle of the 1800s with the introduction of the gutta percha ball, which was much cheaper, and it democratized the game. But the fact is that until basically the 20th century, almost all golf courses in Scotland on the links were free to play. They were essentially just public land.
Open, yeah.
You didn't pay a green fee. You didn't go to a pro shop. You just, you might, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was like the surf breaks in Hawaii, where if you went out there, you might get your ass beaten by old Tom Morris or something. If you had to like follow a certain code. I'd love to know more about the dynamics of that, but there wasn't a green fee here, right? Yeah, that changes. Memberships and green fees got to be much higher, and not just because it's not all the fault of Harry Colt or whatever. But I think that's undoubtedly a legacy of the Golden Age, that expectations were raised for what a golf course would be. And in order to meet those expectations, you had to spend money. And if you're going to spend money, you had to get it back.
Money. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you make of that?
I like pinning that all on one guy, Harry Colt. Just
right.
Sticking him to the board, being like, this all came back to you. I like the idea of doing that. No, I mean, that makes sense. If you are... Like I said before, if you're putting money into it, you have to inherently get money out of it, unless you're just like this giant philanthropist, which I feel like probably not. If you were a giant philanthropist in 1901, I feel like building a golf course was probably not your way of doing it. Yeah. So that all tracks, makes sense. And then you think about where, at least the great golf courses are on Long Island. For the most part, it's all in the Hamptons. Like, that is not a coincidence, I'm sure.
Well, listen, you know who really explored the outer limits of how much you could spend on a golf course? C.B. McDonald at National Golf Links. He raised, I believe the number is $70,000.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
To build National Golf Links. He was a member of all these clubs in New York. He knew all the rich guys. And he got like 70 of them to each pay $1,000, an unbelievable sum of money to spend on a golf course, just completely breaking through all previous barriers for how much you would spend on a golf course in the U.S. or probably even Britain, probably even England.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody had done anything like that before. And that is part of C.B. McDonald's legacy. He figured out how to finance a super ambitious golf course project, and it was not easy to build the National. Like they didn't have turf for a while. They had to like invent new forms of agronomy to make that golf course happen. And what do you need to do that? You need money.
Yeah.
And what's the result of that? You can't walk up to National Golf Links and play it.
No, you can't. So as a whole, would you say this was all a good thing? I assume.
Well, I want to know your perspective on that. For me, and just to put my cards on the table here, I think every single historical legacy of every phenomenon ever is complex.
Yes.
But I think if there's one thing that I would insist on, it's that just because we call it the Golden Age doesn't mean we have to say that it's perfect.
That makes sense.
That's my perspective on it, but how are you feeling at this point?
I don't know. I mean, it feels like in order to #grow the game, this had to happen, right? Like the sport would not be in the place that it is today, would not be in the place that it was in the 80s. Any of this would not have happened if this time period and this development of pay for play, pay for building, becoming more of an art, however you want to phrase it, occurred.
Absolutely correct. And plus, we can't just reduce the whole thing to money.
No.
There was a lot of brilliance that went into this as well. Those ideas that we talked about, strategic design, naturalism.
I would like to be very clear.
Brilliant.
I do not mean to offend the Knights Templar of golf here. Take me off of your list.
Oxford and Cambridge Golfing Society. Lower.
I'm not.
Call back the stealth.
I'm not. I'm scared of you.
Planes.
I am scared of you. I'm good. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do here. However, I definitely think there is an aspect to losing the, I don't want to call it like the ideals of the game, but from the origin of just like having it be public land and anybody can like losing anytime. And this goes for probably anything to some extent, as you said. Anytime you infuse a boatload of money into anything, I think you're losing part of the soul of anything at the end of the day, and that has clearly happened here.
Very well said. I do think that spirit of links golf, which can be fetishized and romanticized to a degree. There were problems with it, and not everything was hunky-dory all the time. But listen, the Golden Age is understood generally as a recovery of the ideals of links golf.
Okay.
And in the sense that it brought strategic golf design and naturalism into architecture, that's absolutely valid.
Yeah.
But in another sense, the Golden Age was a complete betrayal of the ideals of links golf, in that it made it private. It took it out of public land. In fact, it took public land in the Heathlands, what used to be public land,
yes,
and privatized it. People now listen. If you go to the English Heathlands now, people are kind of walking around it, and it feels very communal. It's not like private golf clubs in the States. So I don't want to overstate that. But it's so interesting to me how the Golden Age is both of those things at the same time. It is a recovery of the early spirit of links golf, and it is an abandonment at the same time. And it is something entirely new, a new model. Now, was there any other way to create excellent inland golf? Maybe not. Right? Those early inland courses weren't very good.
Somebody would have figured it out a different way, right? It's one of those like life finds a way kind of things. If there was another way to do this, inevitably it would have happened, and it didn't. So this was the answer at the end of the day. This
was our universe in the multiverse. This is what happened, but it probably would have gone this direction because capitalism, right? This is kind of how things work. But yes, I think this is the big takeaway, is that when people toss around the term Golden Age, it kind of has a rosy hue to it. Everything Golden Age is great. But that's not necessarily the case. And one of the legacies of the Golden Age that we can build beyond is this sense that in order to make something really excellent, you have to throw more money at it. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think it was unreasonable for them to do that at the time. And in fact, the amounts of money that they were spending on golf courses in the Golden Age pales in comparison to the 30 million that has now become conventional for golf course projects. But if we're thinking about how we understand the Golden Age and react to it, and how we bring its ideals into our own time, maybe we can borrow some architectural concepts. We can borrow some of the theory of design, while at the same time acknowledging that there's some reversing, of course, to be done here, and that the idea of lands on which you play the game that aren't perfect and aren't overly engineered, that idea can live somewhere in golf. There's a place for that.
Are there, I don't know the way to phrase this question, but as you went down the list before and you're talking about all of these great iconic golf courses built within this area, like, are there bad Golden Age golf courses that like are not relevant in any way, shape, or form? Like, as you said, we look back on rosy colored glasses and all of these iconic places that they're just like, was there like a lot of wasted time and opportunity through this too?
That's such a good question. And, I generally haven't really met many Golden Age courses that I haven't loved, but that's partly because there's a selection bias inevitably, right? The courses that have survived have generally been well taken care of and were pretty good in the first place.
Yeah.
But 100%, there were some bad courses built in the 1900s, 10s, 20s, and 30s in the US, in Britain, and elsewhere. You just don't hear much about them, right? And so there's always a selection bias at play here in what we discuss, what we're exposed to, and what has managed to survive the times. But there's no doubt that the quality, that the hit rate, right, as they'd say in cricket, the batting average was high.
Okay.
I don't know if it's hit rate. Maybe it's strike rate in cricket. I don't know cricket. Cricket is the sport that I know the least about.
I can't help you there either. So don't look at me.
and you're like a sports savant.
Yeah,
you know everything about everything, but not cricket.
I have nothing on cricket, so don't look at me on that. But.
The batting average was very high among the best architects of the Golden Age, partly because, again, to bring this idea back, that the land was really good. The properties were really good. Land prices were fairly low.
Yeah.
Things hadn't been overdeveloped. Stuff was available near major metros. You could find a piece of land like the ones just outside of San Francisco, where San Francisco Golf Club and Lake Merced are, just wonderful rolling pieces of land right abutting a major metro area. That stuff doesn't exist right now. No. It's not available for golf development. And so in order to find great land, current golf architects have gone very far afield, have gone to remote places to find the undulating sandy soils that they like. And that has totally changed the nature of golf course development. And it's one way in which the original Golden Age has a huge advantage over every era since then.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense that there was more opportunity. I was just wondering if everything, it seems like everything was going well. It seems like there were a lot of famous people that came out of this, and everybody had a lot of great ideas, and everybody was having such a great time that, like...
There are a lot of really good courses.
Yeah.
There were also very active debates about what made a good golf course. I've talked about the ideas that I think are the most important and the ones that ended up becoming the most influential. But there were other ideas that other people had. There were people who were arguing to their dying day that penal architecture was the way to go, and that it was a big mistake to go the route that we did. There was a lot of discussion. And in fact, I think that actually is an important characteristic of the Golden Age as well, was just the volume and quality of discussion that people had about it. An unbelievable amount was written about golf architecture in these decades.
Yep.
In newspapers, in magazines, in books that were published. People were, and that doesn't even account for the verbal conversations that were had, I'm sure, relentlessly at golf courses. But just if you're looking at the print legacy, the literary legacy, it's enormous. And that kind of stopped, more or less, in the 40s, 50s, 60s. It has been revived recently. The internet has had a big role to play there where discussion has come back. But I think that the existence of that conversation is also a big reason that the quality of work during the Golden Age was generally so high. Whether that work followed the most popular ideas or not, the work was engaged with the conversation that was happening, and that gave it a complexity and an integrity. I'm searching for the right word here, but it gave it something that made it feel alive, even if it wasn't all strategic and naturalist, etc.
Yeah, people were engaging with the work. I mean, that makes sense. That anytime there's a feedback loop, it's never a bad thing. Again, like if it gets people talking at the end of the day, that's what you want, right?
That's right. You often say, it's good to have a take. You want to listen to people who have takes. They had takes. Everybody who was designing a significant golf course in this period had a take. And I think that's true today as well, which is something that makes the current era that we're living in pretty exciting.
All right, so I have one more question here. So you focused a lot on the London aspect of kind of the genesis of this.
Yeah.
Did anything like different happen once it came to America or even Australia or Japan or any of the other places that you mentioned?
Absolutely. And this is part of the oversimplification that I've had to do in order to make this topic manageable for an episode of the podcast. But you could have a whole discussion about the American Golden Age and how that came about, the particular features of that. I think that, the story that I would have told you if I had engaged with that subject would be the building of national golf links. We've already kind of covered that in our ideal holes episode, our template holes episode. But C.B. Macdonald was a North American who went over to Scotland, got educated there, and experienced links golf, and brought those ideas to the States, but put his own completely different spin on it. This idea of ideal holes was a new one. And he did pick up on the financial technology of spending a ton of money in constructing a golf course.
He learned that for sure.
Having those big ambitions and those big expectations for what it would be. But it was different for sure. It was the same kinds of ideas and trends, but just kind of reflected back in a funhouse mirror. And so, yes, it was different. But in other respects, listen, who were the architects who were building a lot of the best courses in the golden age in the U.S. during the 1920s? We're talking about Alistair Mackenzie. We're talking about, earlier on Willie Park, who designed Sunningdale.
Yep.
Designed quite a few courses in the States. Harry Colt came over a couple of times. Allison came over a couple of times. We were importing some of the same architects while developing some homegrown talents like C.B. Macdonald, like George Thomas. There were definitely Americans who became engaged in this, but they were, they could read London newspapers and stuff like that. So a lot of the same ideas were circulating. Now, one factor here is that the English Golden Age is generally concentrated earlier than the American Golden Age. The English Golden Age was really from about 1901 to the outbreak of World War II in, I believe, 1914. Mm-hmm. That was where most of the action of the English Golden Age happened. In the United States, the beginning point you could really kind of fix at 1911 when National Golf Links opened.
Okay.
But most of the stuff happened in the 1920s. It was the Roaring 20s. There was plenty of there were plenty of people who were willing to fund golf course projects, and that's a big reason why they happened. And these ideas came over from Great Britain to influence what happened in the 20s, but it was generally happening later. The same thing didn't really go down in England in the 1920s because England was more affected by World War I.
Yeah.
And so, that's the reason why, your Alistair Mackenzies probably ended up setting up shop in the U.S. because there was just more to do here. There weren't as many projects happening in England.
That makes sense. That's putting it in the context of the times again, like you said before.
It's all, every place is a little bit different. Australia is different again. I've told the story before on different podcasts about Alistair Mackenzie going to Royal Melbourne and then, kind of spreading seeds throughout Australia that eventually grew into an impressive flowering of Golden Age architecture there. But that happened in the late 20s, right? That was later again. So different. Japan is a whole subject that I've been too intimidated to take on myself, but Charles Allison went over there and did some interesting stuff. And so, every little place is different. And, if we were doing a proper survey of the Golden Age, we would also talk maybe about the ending point of it, what effects the Great Depression had, what effects the Second World War had. But if we dug into all that stuff, we'd be here for another few hours. So I think a good starting point is these three ideas of money, strategic design, and naturalism. I think that's a good starting point for us.
This is great. I'm happy that we found Harry Colt as the one guy to pin this all on and put him up on the board, circle him in red, and then the branches can go out from there.
I love it. He deserves it. Maybe
gotta blame somebody. Gotta blame somebody.
But it's fine with me that we blame Harry Colt. He's been dead for a long time. So
what's he gonna do?
he genuinely seems like he was probably a pretty nice guy. But I'm still willing to pin it on him.
It's okay. Everybody needs a fall guy.
All right, PJ, thank you so much for joining me. This was fun.
Thanks for having me.
This episode of Designing Golf was produced by Will Balsam. Thank you, Will. If you're looking for a wonderful holiday gift, consider giving the gift of Fried Egg Golf Club. Go to thefriedegg.com/membership and see what it's all about. We have a new discussion forum in Fried Egg Golf Club that has been a lot of fun for me personally. I've been all over it. I've become like a message board rat on there. And I'm probably annoying people at this point, but the conversations we're having there have been really positive. People have been nice, and also they've been saying interesting things. So I'm digging that right now. That's a new feature of Friday Golf Club. We're constantly trying to introduce new things to our member experience. There are events that are exclusive to members that you can participate in if you want. There's a great deal of exclusive content, course profiles, design notebook, as we call it, chocolate drops, all that kind of stuff that members know about. So come join us at Friday Golf Club. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back again soon with another episode.